Okay, so now we have to talk about relative frequency distributions. Now with the relative frequency distribution, this shows the frequency of each class as a fraction of the total, or a portion of the total frequency distribution. So you're going to take each class and you're going to see what percentage is this. Let's say for the class of 1, 2, what's the portion of this? What's the percentage of this? And the formula that we're going to be working with here would be the frequency of the class divided by the total frequency. And that'll give us, that's an F, so a little clearer, that'll give us the relative frequency. So let's give it a shot. We'll draw in another column here. And that will be the relative frequency distribution. So starting off the class of 1, frequency of 2. That's going to give us a relative frequency of 0.1333 repeating. 0.13 repeating. Now, as a general rule in this course, go 2 decimal places past what the data gives you. Careful with rounding. Rounding can be tricky and it can mislead. Don't be rounding mid-equation. Wait till you get to the end of the equation. And if you have a series of equations, wait till you get to the end of the series of equations before you consider rounding. You want more precision when and if you can give it. So continuing with this, class of 2 with a frequency of 3 would give us a relative frequency of 0.20. Class of 3, frequency of 2, well, that's the same as before, so we can go with 0.13 repeated. Class of 4 with a frequency of 6 will give us a relative frequency of 0.40. Class of 5 with a frequency of 1, that would give us 0.06 repeated. Now you're going to have to do some rounding here. So in this particular case, we would go 0.07. Class of 6 with a frequency of 0, well, that would give us 0.00. Class of 7 with a frequency of 1 divided by 15, again would give us 0.07. Now we total this out, so bring this down, and when we add this together, being that each of these is a portion of a whole, the total will come to 1.00. Now sometimes that may be a little bit off. Sometimes you may end up with something like, let's say it's 0.99, or let's say it's 1.01. That can happen sometimes. A lot of times that's an indication that your rounding is going to be a little bit off. There's an oscillation that goes on with rounding that isn't always obvious at first. So double check. If it's a rounding error, that can be okay. But remember, mathematically, error does not mean mistake. Error is an indication of fluctuation, of oscillation around the true value. A mistake is if you round something incorrectly. So if something should be rounded up and you round it down or don't round it at all, that's going to be a problem. That's not an error, that's a mistake, and there is a difference. Next step with the relative frequency distribution is we just want to convert this now into percentages. Right? And you most likely know how to do this already. Take your relative frequency and times it by 100, or move your decimal place. So let's put relative frequency percent. Now be careful with this. A lot of times the mistakes that get made is sort of like when you're sending a text message. You're thinking very quickly and you're typing with your thumbs as fast as you can. And then after you hit send, you read it and you go, oh, damn. I was thinking things that didn't come off in the text. And if we don't carefully look at what we're rounding and take our time, we can still make that mistake. And that would not be a mistake, an error in the sense that like an oscillation or a fluctuation. That would be a mistake. So we got to handle this very carefully. So this would be 13%. The class of 2 with a frequency of 3, that's 20%. Class of 3 with a frequency of 2, that's also 13% of the whole frequency. The class of 4 with a frequency of 6 is 40% of the overall frequency distribution. Class of 5 frequency of 1, well, that gives us 7% of the entire distribution. 6, class of 6 with a frequency of 0, well, that's going to give us 0%. There's nothing there. That's empty. And 7 with a frequency of 1, well, that gives us back to the 7%. And as with this column, when we add this up, that will come to 100%. That'll be the total. And you can take a look at the data set. And I spell some stuff out. Now that we've taken the raw data and we've broken it down into a frequency distribution in the other video, and now gone with the relative frequency distribution, that shows us some of the patterns at a glance within this data. What's really going on? Like, for example, we know that of the sample that we've taken a look at, 40% of these people come from a family with children numbering in 4. So there's 4 children in the family that they came from. 40%. That's a lot. 20% come from families where there's 3 children in the family, and so on. And it's at a glance. So that's relative frequency distribution. In the next video, we'll take a look at cumulative frequency distributions and what those can tell us.